few of you have asked me for my view on Boris Johnson claiming that Margaret Thatcher gave the UK a head start in its efforts to reduce carbon emissions by closing so many coal mines across the country. Now, the Prime Minister was quoted as going further and saying, well, thanks to Margaret Thatcher, who closed so many coal mines across the country, we had a big early start and we're now moving rapidly away from coal altogether. Now, this has led to Labour calling on Johnson to apologise and Nicola Sturgeon to argue that it was a crass and deeply insensitive comment. Now, before I actually get on to what I make of Boris Johnson's remarks, I think it's important to first of all make clear to these opposition parties that these complete and utter contemptible charlatans in the opposition parties haven't got a leg to stand on. There have been proposals for open cast coal mining put forward over recent years that would have given the coal we need for steel, for cement. How do you think we build those great big sodden wind turbines? And for heritage rail, right? These proposals were opposed. So now we don't offer high-skill, high-wage jobs to people in this country, and instead we export them to the likes of Russia, Australia and elsewhere to import the coal that we actually still need. That would of course mean jobs for local lads and communities that need it, the kind of communities that these opposition politicians now purport to care about when it comes to Thatcher closing mines and comments by Boris Johnson. You couple that, right? You think about that, and you consider the fact that all parties of all colours have backed this net zero target. And folks, I think we're all going to feel it. There'll be no one more hurt of course, than the poorest in society. We're told that higher energy bills are here already. We're told that the ban on gas boilers is en route, petrol and diesel cars with them, and other so-called green measures that'll cost the taxpayer 1.4 trillion. And apparently that's a pretty conservative estimate by the Office for Budget Responsibility. And this, I think, is all cheered on by politicians. So spare me, right? Spare me the performative attempts to convince us that you suddenly care about the working class as you trample over their living standards to boost, let's not forget, the green pet projects by a money delete. Apparently Boris Johnson's comments have gone down like a bag of sick with red wall seat MPs, and I'm not surprised. I think for many people and many voters, the sense of pride in place in yourself and your community, that loss of those things still lingers on. All the way back to me granddad's generation, right? Who secured his housing from his time in the pits. And that's not for a second. Not for a second. To suggest that my late granddad would have wanted to see his kids or his grandkids down the pits. They weren't the kind of high-tech, safe, open cast iteration that we see proposed today. They were dirty, they were dark, they were damp, and my granddad had respiratory problems and an inability to fully extend his arm, thanks to years down the mines with one of those big old drills. So this is no pitch to say that Thatcher, who closed fewer mines by the way than Labour Prime Minister Harold Wilson, can find no argument whatsoever in favour of closing mines back then. They were uncompetitive and they'd brought the country to a standstill in the late 70s when the trade unions decided to bring the country to a standstill. But to make a joke about it, I think is crass. I do actually agree with Nicola Sturgeon, to be honest with you, believe it or not. First time for everything. Because I think you can't joke about the long, bitter and frankly divided battle that ripped the very heart from communities. I think it was pretty tone deaf to do that, especially as a Prime Minister who knows what this country went through during Brexit, who knows the sort of working class struggle during those years where we were told by a technocratic elite that we didn't know what was good for us and all the rest of it. Many felt similar feelings back then. You know, many including my own family, by the way, who often to this day say that miners didn't just lose their jobs, but they were left struggling, abandoned and feeling hopeless. I think Boris should remember that you cannot easily take for granted the votes and views of people like that, who don't see Thatcher's mine closures as some kind of nod to a yet-to-be-born apocalyptic acolyte of net zero policies and politics in Greta Thunberg, for example. He should consider, I think, the hurt and resentment that is still felt today. And I think for me, this all serves to highlight the identikit views, right? They're all the same, of those who refuse to entertain the idea that it'll be the poorest in society who once again carry the heaviest burden in higher energy costs, in more expensive cars, in a ban on their gas boilers, in an increase on the cost of their food, in being told that they can now no longer afford to go on holiday. It won't be those advocating these policies that suffer. It won't be the opposition politics that is espoused by Nicola Sturgeon and the Labour Party that suffer. So they can point their fingers at Boris and Thatcher all they like. The fact of the matter is that they're pushing policies that'll do everything to the working class that they accuse Mrs Thatcher of presiding over. If anything, I think this should serve as a reminder to politicians that a working class revolt, not unlike the mining strikes, could be underway once the cost of net zero becomes clear. Costs that politicians seem reluctant to let us see. The Telegraph report that a Treasury review of the costs of reducing net greenhouse gas emissions to zero by 2050, that asphyxiating target, asphyxiating and arbitrary, I might add, that's been delayed since the spring. I wonder why, folks. I wonder why. I'm Darren Grimes for Reasoned UK. Reasoned relies upon grassroots donations from people like yourself that want us to continue producing our high quality, free thinking content. So please do consider clicking the link and donating, no matter how big, no matter how small, because it really does ensure that we can keep on keeping on